during that time, when I look at those videos, it was like me going through the biggest transition of my life, of like before Lynn, where I knew things, right? Where I was very sure about my life, where I was very sure about my meaning in life. You know, I had a very solid, stable ground underneath me. I had a very clear plan in front of me with my partner. And then that was all gone. And so those early videos represent, or they're documenting a person who was trying to figure out how to like, not let that go, but just transition and evolve.
How is Grace feeling in this very moment?
Very excited and content.
Why excited and content?
I think I'm content because we pulled off a good pride. Sorry, probably not the point of the interview, but and excited to talk about whatever we talk about today.
Lynn passed away about 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned that you had recorded yourself doing day-to-day things every day, or kind of off and on for about 4 years. What did that do for you?
I think that, so even before Lynn passed, I was into photography and videography. So I always had like literally a little point and shoot that I could put in my pocket. And I had my phone, but I rarely used my phone. And I had a GoPro. So when Lynn passed in December 2014, all of 2015 was like, I kept my world very small. I couldn't like, talk to many people. Like I just was like, my energy was just like very, very small, very compartment. When somebody passed, when you're going through that, grief is fatiguing. Grief takes up so much mental and emotional and physical energy. Even if you're just sitting there, it's fatiguing. And so I didn't have energy to interact with people, except for a few close people. And also, I'm a social worker, so I'm very curious about human behavior. And so even as I was like deeply grieving and barely able to like talk or do anything, there was a part of me that was very observant and curious about what was happening to my body and my mental and emotional state, my physical state. The fatigue was just like instant. And it was like, I'm a very enthusiastic, energetic person normally. And so for that energy to just like completely go away, and then also for my mental and emotional state to be like very like only able to handle so much, was very interesting. And so as it was almost like I was outside of myself, observing myself. And I recognized it as my body taking care of itself, my physical body taking care of itself, as well as my mental and emotional beings taking care of itself. And it was fascinating to me because I could literally just sit there for like 4 hours and watch the clock hands turn around and be like, and it was like a few minutes had passed. Like in grief, like time and space gets really weird. It was all very strange. So as somebody who's interested and curious about human behavior, part of me was just wanting to kind of observe and document myself from an outside perspective, but the only way I could do that was with a camera. So I think that was part of the documentation, because I was just like, what is happening to me? This is really interesting. So kind of documenting that, but then the other part was also recognizing that even in day-to-day activities, like going to the park or getting an oil change, all these experiences, things I'd done a million times before, everything was a new experience. Like when somebody passes, like your partner, every single thing in life changes. Every single thing is new. So like even looking like at a brick wall, it's like, oh, I remember that brick wall on vacation that one time in New Orleans, and you know what I mean? Like everything is a reminder of something when you're in a long-term relationship. So it was kind of like I couldn't express that to anybody who understood, but I could express it to myself. So I think maybe documenting and using a camera on myself was kind of like just a conversation with myself.
When you look back at those videos, how do you feel now?
I think that my heart goes out to that person. And like, I think I wish I could just say like, you're gonna get through this. It's gonna change and it's gonna evolve. And also, and I would tell myself this at the time too, this is a really sacred journey. Like, I feel like what I've gone through, especially those first few years, was just like this really sacred, unique journey that not everybody goes through, thank goodness. And I talk with I have a lot of widowed friends, so we can talk with each other about it. But I was going, like, if I look back in those videos, it was that time where for me, I was the closest to spirit than I've ever been in my life. And so during that time, when I look at those videos, it was like me going through the biggest transition of my life, of like before Lynn, where I knew things, right? Where I was very sure about my life, where I was very sure about my meaning in life. I had a very solid, stable ground underneath me. I had a very clear plan in front of me with my partner. And then that was all gone. And so those early videos represent, or they're documenting a person who was trying to figure out how to like, not let that go, but just transition and evolve, as well as like to be like truly, honestly, like really intent on maintaining and learning this new relationship with Lynn.
How has your relationship with Lynn changed, and how has it remained the same?
I would say it remains the same in the sense that, like when you have a best friend and they just call you on your shit all the time, she still does that like a million times a million, So like that's very, very, very clear in my head whenever like I'm doing something that maybe I know I'm not supposed to do or blah, blah, whatever. And I hear it in my head and it's still my choice to do it or not do it. So it's very much still like a partnership. Cause like, we don't always do what our partners want us to do, whether they're dead or alive. So, so that's completely stayed the same. She's still critical of the things that she was critical of me before because we have differences of opinion. That hasn't changed. It doesn't make me change my decisions either. I would say like, I feel like I still can have conversations with her all the time. And it's funny, this is another part of like what hasn't changed. She's still my number one cheerleader. It's really interesting. Even as she's like being like, why are you doing this? You should be doing this, blah, blah, blah. She's still like a million times my number one cheerleader. And, but it's changed obviously because she's passed. She's in spirit form. So it's frustrating for me to be like, I really need your input on this decision I need to make. And for me, it's harder to hear what she's saying in a sense, And then also when, I don't know, this is just for me, when I'm in partnership with somebody who's in spirit form, a lot of the earthly things don't matter to them. So like, oh, I'm gonna paint this wall blah blah color, and it's like, she may tease me, but she doesn't really care. Like, you know what I mean? It makes me realize what's unimportant in life ultimately. Even though like, when she was here, in body, we might have like spent weeks arguing over what paint color something should be. You know what I mean? So it's interesting, and also, on the other side, I know that she has like even larger roles to play, larger tasks in the world to play. So it's kind of like, it's like we're just in a very long distance relationship, like a very, very long and open. It's a long distance and open relationship.
So you still live in the house you and Lynn lived in together 8 to 9 years. Mm-hmm. How has your relationship to the space changed, and what does it look like now?
After she passed, I was just like, I'm never leaving this house. That was our home. And so that home represents her and I, but it just also represents to me like the culmination of a lot of hard work in our relationship. Like we had built a life of community service, and a lot of times with that comes a low income, which is fine. It was a choice. But so when we bought that house, for me, it represented like, see, we can do it both ways. We can live a life of service and not have to make a lot of money and still figure out how to buy a house. And it was almost like our reward for living such a good life. And for me, it was also a representation of like our next chapter in life, which in some ways we didn't get to really realize. So for the first many years, it was kind of like those battles that you have with a partner around a house. Like, I always wanted to rip out the carpet. She never wanted to. And then after she passed, I think it was about a year and a half, and I was like, well, I'm going to rip out the carpet. And it was very, very bittersweet. It was a very bittersweet victory. And it was a lot of like, okay, you can stop me anytime, just come back. Because, for the first year to year and a half, I was just I very much believed she was going to come back. Like, my first year, and it's interesting because I've said this before, and a lot of widows were like, I totally thought that too. I 1,000,000% thought that if I was a very good widow of the first year, that on her anniversary she was going to come back. And I think that thought didn't go away for a little while, for a few months, I think.
You had mentioned that the hardest part about grieving Lynn was dealing with the rest of society. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I've always said that if I could have just been alone or been left alone to just grieve losing my partner, that would have been such a luxury. But dealing with other people, in the sense of, well, first off, I had so many supportive people, so many supportive friends who did not know what I was going through, but still were able to like listen to me rant and rave and didn't understand what I was saying, and or could also sit with me even if I said no more than like 1 or 2 words at all, and would just keep sitting with me. So friends who could sit in the discomfort and confusion, and who knew that they could not help, but were okay with not being able to help, and weren't trying to be like, oh, feel better, or oh, let's do this, you'll feel better. Weren't trying to make me feel better, because in society, in American society, people want you to feel better right away. They want you to get better, and they want you to. They can't handle you first not being happy, and also secondly, they're very uncomfortable with not being able to do XYZ to fix the problem. And I think that in grief, as a supportive friend, you have to be okay with not being able to fix your friend, because 1,000,000%, I'm totally honored to be Lynn's partner to grieve her. Like, it's very, in my opinion, it's an honor to be the one to grieve her as somebody who lost her as a partner. And so for people to be like, oh, you're doing really well because, you came out, on a walk. It was like, it doesn't mean I'm doing well per se. It just means I'm physically able to go for a walk today. But of course, for me at the time, I didn't even know how to articulate that, because I didn't even know what I was doing, or I didn't know what I was going through. And so it was tiring having to take care of other people's feelings, I think. So there was all that. But it was interesting, just like dealing with people's responses, because then like there's also people like my parents where we don't talk about feelings or anything like that, and they wouldn't necessarily ask me what I need. But they would show up and do my front yard work. They wouldn't even tell me they were there. And I would like open the door and they'd be there doing my yard work, or, like mowing my lawn or whatever. And I'd be like, what are you doing? I can't come out and help you. And they're like, oh no, just go back inside, it's fine. So it's just, for me, it made me recognize the different ways that people can support somebody who's grieving. That doesn't look like, what do you need? Tell me what you need. Because to be honest, I literally could not have told people what I needed, because I didn't know what the hell I needed. Right. I mean, my only goals at that time was like to shower by noon and feed the dogs and pay the mortgage. Those were like my only goals for a really long time.
Yeah, it's almost like when someone asks you what do you need, it's a burden to think about what
It's a total burden. Yeah, it was exhausting answering people. And I was not going to take guilt trips, which a lot of people tried to put on me too. Like, oh, you didn't call me back. I'm like, yeah, you can be okay with that. I'm going through the worst thing possible. And it would literally be people being like, I can't even imagine the pain you're going through. I don't even want to think about it. Do you want to go to a party this weekend? Like people don't realize this is life changing. I'm going through a major life change right now. I'm not even here. Like, I'm literally not here. You're talking to a shell. and you're asking me these normal everyday questions. And it's like, I think that's the thing. People don't, and God bless them, you know, how could they unless they're told? But like, you can't talk to me like you've talked to me in the past, you know? So yeah, it was frustrating. And then just the comments, like, oh, she would want you to blah, blah, blah. And it was like, first off, don't tell me what she would want me to do, because I know her better than anyone. So don't anyone tell me what Lynn would want. And then secondly, it was like, do you do everything your partner wants? Because I still don't, even if she's passed. And it was just like, you know, I can make my own choices. I don't care if she would want XYZ or if you want me to do XYZ. This is where I'm at right now. This is what I'm capable of, you know. But it's like I couldn't articulate that, of course, at the time.
What are a few things that you've learned about yourself and the grieving process that you weren't expecting?
I didn't realize two things. I didn't realize how powerful collective energy is. So like, you know, a lot of people knew Lynn and I. And there were so many strangers that were sending me good thoughts, good healing thoughts, good energy, et cetera, praying circles, et cetera. And I didn't know these people. And yet, even when I'm sitting by myself at home in total grief and despair, I feel like I felt that energy helping me and supporting me. You know what I mean? And so that was something. I mean, I'm not a woo-woo person until now, but I really now recognize the power and impact of collective prayer, you know? So that was one thing. And the second thing was I realized how important it can be to kind of heal with other people who have related situations. I didn't realize that before. I'm not a group therapy kind of person, although I completely support and believe it. It wasn't until I was able to meet with other widows in group form and really share experiences that I was able to really start healing in a lot of ways. Talking with other people with shared experiences was powerful. It was like, you know, to go through life not feeling understood or not even understanding yourself, and then to meet other people or just one other person who articulates what you're feeling, even though you didn't know that's what you were feeling, is so validating, you know, because it was a lot of, and I talk with a lot of new widows now, and they'll say something, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I feel so weird, or I said this, and I'm going through this, and then a bunch of us will be like, yep, totally normal, we went through that, yep, totally normal. And of course, I didn't realize that at the time. So like, the validation, the acknowledgement, you don't feel so crazy and alien in this world. It was huge. It was huge. So those were the two main things.
So I want to go back to just you dealing with society and your grieving process. What's something that you wish people understood about the process and about your journey?
I would say one thing is there's no timeline. Don't compare people's timelines. So just if you think, oh, if they're 1 month out, they're 2 months out, they should be at this place in time. Throw that out the window. Even like 1 year, 2 years, you know, people are going to be where they're at. The timeline is different for everybody. There's situations that you may not even realize they're going through. So I would throw out any expectation of, oh, it's been this amount of time, they should be XYZ. And I would say the second thing is, if you truly want to support somebody who's grieving, learn how to hold space. Learn how to put yourself aside, put your ego, your expectations, your judgment, even your advice aside. Because if you truly want to hold space for somebody, you are not part of their process. You just listen to them, let them take all of the space, and you just sit there with them. And it's very uncomfortable. And there's not XYZ that you can do to fix anything. Because oftentimes what they just need is to get through that hour. And if you can sit through that hour with them to get through that, that is a lot. But it takes the ability to like put your, and if you're not that kind of person, don't pretend to be that person. It's okay if you can't do that. Maybe you can buy groceries. You know what I mean? Maybe you can do something else. If you're emotionally not able to put yourself to the side and hold space, then don't offer that.
Any misconceptions that you think people have around the grieving process and around?
Um, I would say probably a ton. I say this with a lot of folks, especially newly widowed, is that the first year is horrible, obviously. The second year was harder than the first, and the third year was the hardest. And that's not 100%, but I probably know more widows that say that than don't say that. And then for me, I'm in my 8th year right now, and my 8th year is challenging once again. Like my 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th year was pretty, not bad. But my 8th year is challenging again, and I think it's because I'm moving into yet another new chapter.
What does it mean to be a good widow? I mean, at that time, what were you doing?
For me, that meant like grieving really well, like showing that I'm grieving, that I'm sad, that and I was, so it wasn't inauthentic, but I think also like intentionally honoring her. Remember, she was a very big person in our community, and after she passed, she got a lot of awards from the county, from the city, from nonprofits. So it was like, okay, I'm going to show up, I'm going to accept these awards on her behalf, I'm going to tell people what she did, et cetera, et cetera. So that was like being the good widow, right? And it was a role I was honored to have, but I really thought she was going to come back. I really, really thought that on her anniversary she was going to come back, and then she didn't. But like with the house, it was just like, it was very, very much like, it's our house. I'm not leaving. It's our house together. I'm always going to like have it, set up like our house. It's still Lynn's house. And it's only like in the last year or so that I've kind of like evolved into like, oh, what does Grace want? Who am I looking into the future. I've never like thought forward planning.
What's one thing you miss about a past version of yourself?
Ooh. One thing I miss is ever since I was young, I was very clear on my meaning of life, my mission in life. It was, gosh, I don't even know if I can articulate it now, but I was never one of those people that had to find out who I was or, think about what I wanted to do in life. I just had a very, very, very clear understanding of why I was here, what I was going to do, and I did it. And then I met Lynn, who shared the same goal and vision in life and mission. And it's not like we really talked about it, but we built a life that was in alignment of that vision. And when she passed, I completely lost all of that. So to be honest, even like 7.5 years later, I think I'm still searching for what my meaning in life is, what my mission in life is, why I'm here, that sort of a thing. So I miss that. I miss that 1,000,000% clarity of why I was here, who I am, my meaning in life.
So what are some things that helped you feel connected to Lynn when she was alive? And then what do you do now that helps you feel connected to her?
I would say it's the same thing, community service. Her passion and dedication to community service, to a life of service to HIV clients was just like, that's the legacy that she left behind in a lot of ways. That's what connected us. We met at a women's shelter. We were both working at a women's shelter. And, I think that for the two of us to observe each other doing work that we were both passionate about is why we fell in love with each other. I would get to see her just show clients and show her staff such compassion, such understanding, such patience. I would see her convene people at the same table, people who were politicians and medical providers, as well as people who were homeless or in prison, and she completely made sure that everybody had the equal voice at the table. So I got to observe her. And so now a lot of the work that I do now I still live my life in service. But it was, you know, when she passed, I tried to continue her work, but we were so different. Like, she's brilliant, she's a genius. And I am very much like, I have a lot of passion and I like to meet people. I'm very good with people, but I don't have that brilliance and geniusness that she had, because that's probably not even a word. But so it was probably within that first year of like, okay, how do I continue her work and my work and our work? I had to learn that I could continue her work, but it had to look like me. It had to be in my own way. So, you know, my life is still very much dedicated to service, but it's 1,000,000% in alignment of my personality. But it still completely connects me to her. So I created an annual fundraiser in her honor, and annually it has benefited the nonprofit that she was so passionate about, which helps HIV clients. So still connects us.
Let's talk about your hair.
Because you wanted to.
Talk about it. So you cut your hair after Lynn had passed. Tell me about that moment, why you decided, how it felt when you actually did it.
Well, I will preface this with a long story. No, I'm just kidding. I came out when I was 21, and, you know, many years went by, and then Lynn passed when I was 39. And I always had like longer hair or like shoulder length or whatever. And funnily enough, like Lynn was always the one who cut my hair, just because I couldn't be bothered to go, you know, I don't really care enough to go and get my hair cut. But you know, for years, I mean, especially like as a baby dyke in my 20s, it was like, oh wow, look at the cool girls with short hair, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I could never be like that. So a couple things happened. So like when Lynn passed for that first year and the first couple years, it's just like, you know, your partner passed, your life completely changes, and you go out into the world and everything looks familiar-ish, but you're a completely different person. You know, it feels like being an alien all of a sudden, like overnight. So I totally didn't feel like myself. I didn't know who I felt like. And so I think it was, gosh, I'll have to look, but like within the first year and a half, I had a friend who was a hairdresser. And so I would have her, first I remember like, it was probably like 6 months after Lynn passed. I went to the I was gonna say barber, I don't even know what it's called, the hair cutting place, for the first time. And I'd literally never been in one for like 12 years, because Lynn always cut my hair. So I go in there and I'm like, I don't know, cut it shorter. So I gave no direction. It was just like, I just wanted it a little bit shorter. And so she did it, and then it was like, okay, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. So I had my friend who lives like a few doors down from me, who also is a hairdresser, and I said, I want to cut my hair, and I don't know what that means, and I'm very anxious about it. And so she comes over and she's like, I got you. And so it was probably like 6 months and many visits from her, and me like drinking cocktails while she was cutting my hair, where my hair would just get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And like, I was like, oh, you know, I want it shaved, but I'm not ready to have it shaved. And she's like, all right, I'm gonna shave it underneath, but keep the outside hair long, so no one's gonna know it's shaved. So we did that for like several months. And she would shave like the inside in the back, and she would put like Lynn's initials, or she'd put like a heart. She would put like all these designs, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. You know, I feel connected to Lynn. You know what I mean? Like, but nobody knows unless I show them, kind of a thing. So it was like, it was fun, but it was safe because nobody could see it, you know, unless I showed them. And then like, I don't know, it was probably like a year and a half after Lynn passed where I finally like, it just kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. I'm like, all right, let's just do it. And I had like looked up some pictures of like, actually like Asian American lesbians, dyke, butch, whatever, because like I didn't know, because I was also like my own internalized racism and homophobia. I'm like, I don't want to look like a Filipino butch dyke lesbian, like stereotypical, right? And plus, like, our hair gets all wiry. Like, you can't just shave it and make it look like you want it to look like. So it was a very long process. But then, you know, it was really fun. It was super liberating. I felt more like myself as I saw it. But then the other part was like feeling like an alien in this world where it's like I am completely changed and everybody's treating me the same because they see me. I look exactly the same, right? And I was like, I need to look different on the outside because I am a bazillion times different on the inside. And I need to look, I would look in the mirror and see myself and I'm like, that's not who I am anymore. That's not even familiar to me. So that was another reason where I was like, I need to cut my hair. I need to look like this new version, even if it's a temporary version or a transitional version. And then the other part too is I started wearing makeup, like in like maybe 2 years after Lynn passed. I never wore makeup before. So I called my friend up and I was like, you know, she's like, meet me at Ulta and then we're gonna meet in the parking lot and I'm gonna show you in the parking lot what you're gonna get and then we're gonna go in there. Like it was all this, cause I had no, you know, I didn't care about that stuff before. It was really funny. So now I'm super into it. So yeah, it's interesting. Would I have done all that if Lynn was still alive? I don't know, maybe. I would have come to it at some point. Yeah. When you meet somebody, or at least for me, when Lynn was here, she was my #1 cheerleader. Like she was my home, right? So it's kind of like when you already have your home, when you have that feeling, when there's that #1 person, there's not much more I needed in life. You know, everything else was like fun or icing or whatever. So like when she passed, I mean, I think some of this stuff might have been superficial padding to fill that void kind of a thing, as well as like kind of like exploring my next transition of identity and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think for some people though that I've chatted with, other widows, it was like, yeah, they needed some kind of change. Something, yeah.
And how are you feeling about it now? Do you feel like it matches you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It feels very empowering. Yeah, I think also, you know, when you're in grief or you're in trauma or something, you kind of get this pass from society to do like really crazy things. So I think I kind of took advantage of that too. Like, I'm going to cut my hair and nobody's going to comment on it because they can't because I'm grieving. So, yeah. And so now, like, I know so many people, nobody would believe I had longer hair. Like, you know, you've only known me with short hair.
Yeah, that's true.
Then this looks like me, right?
Although I just saw a photo of you.
I know. I was like, oh, Maya's never seen me with long hair.
What scares you most about your future and what about it excites you?
I think what scares me most is even though she's been gone 7.5 years, I still have not planned a long-term future. You know, like she and I had a very set long-term future. I think that, yeah, so I think that's kind of scares me. I think also like to be 47 and not have a partner and like I can plan my life. That is a consideration of like what changes if somebody comes in. What excites me though is that even though I can't see 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road, I feel like I'm in a very good position today as far as resources, as far as connections in the community, and as far as like, I don't know how to say this, but like my position in the ability to serve the community. I'm really excited about where I am in today and how that's going to evolve in the future.
You know, you sent out these documents to make your partnership legal in 2014 before she passed. Mm-hmm. And as soon as she passed away, that's when it was basically approved.
Right.
In 2015.
Right.
On the same day that she had passed away.
Right.
What did that do for you? How did that help in your journey?
Yeah, so I always felt like legal documentation of a partnership was just a piece of paper. I think that I marched in so many marches for marriage equality, because if people want to get married, whether they're same sex or even interracial, they should have the right to get married. So obviously I'm for marriage equality. But for me, I was always like, it's just a piece of paper. We know who we are. We didn't have any kids, we didn't have any property until later, so it kind of didn't matter in my eyes. And then when she was diagnosed with cancer a couple of weeks before she passed, and somebody said, you should legalize this. It was like not even a thought to like go down and do the paperwork. And then I mailed it in, and then she passed away a few days later. And then when I got the paperwork back in the mail, it had been filed with the courthouse the same day that she had passed, which made it legal. And I didn't think too much about it at the time. I was still like deeply in grief. I wasn't dealing with like finances or the estate or anything like that. But like a few months later, I finally met with a lawyer, and she was like, yeah, this means you're legal. She passed away at 1:30 in the morning, and it was filed on that day, so you're legal. And I was like, that's cool. What what else does that mean? And then when I started dealing with like, her finances and stuff, and to be the one to make the call to close out her accounts or anything like that, and to be able to say, yes, we're legal, I'm her legal domestic partner, it was so validating. And it was also, it avoided the trauma of having her family do all these things and then loop me in as necessary. Because when somebody's your partner, you want to be the person, even as painful as it is, you want to be the person to be dealing with this stuff. They're your person. So I 1,000,000% wanted to be the one to do that, even though it was super hard. So that was super validating. To be able to file jointly was also very validating, which is like super bizarre, but it was like, yeah, legally, we are recognized by the California government that we were domestic partners, that we're legally a couple, because at the time, the federal didn't recognize it yet. So it was very, I didn't realize how much that would affect my feeling inside. It was so validating. And then the other part was like, thank God we made that commitment. It's a true commitment. And then also like to be the one to get to sign the death certificate and to put the information in the death certificate. And also to be the one to make the decisions around, her coffin, or like, all the things that go along with putting somebody to rest, to get to be the one to like hit the button when she's cremated, just stuff like that. It's very validating as somebody's partner to be able to do that stuff.
How has grief and this change affected how you date? How was dating earlier on in your grieving journey, and what is it like now?
There's no elegant answer to this, Maya. I have those same questions. When she passed, it was so interesting how she had several celebrations of life, and she got honored so many times and received so many certificates that like every time she receives a certificate, there would be like a reception, which felt like another celebration of life, which was beautiful and lovely. But it was very interesting how like even in those receptions, her coworkers and friends would come up to me and be like, I know somebody. Or like, if you're in, I'm like, what? And secondly, there was like, I don't know if it was pressure, but assumption from people, just random people, that like, oh, you want to date, right? I have somebody, or you can do this. And there's like, all these apps and blah, blah, blah. And so for me, it was like deeply grieving. Like for myself, I was like, okay, I'm not even gonna think about dating for at least a year. Just for myself, but also for other people to be like, leave me alone. And then again, I also think that I still felt like she was gonna come back after a year, So it's like, why would I date? And then I remember the year passed, and I was going into the second year, and a couple things happened. My first year, I was like, when I got into my second year, I was like, holy shit, I survived my first year, and I could barely look up. And then I started getting some energy back in my second year. I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna go away again. I went 1,000,000% miles per hour, with like partying and like hanging out with people and just saying yes to everything. And then also I was like, okay, all I wanna do, like as far as dating goes, I just wanna get my first kiss done. I just wanna make a good first kiss, and then I'll be good for like a year, another year, or something like that. And it was good. Cause like I'd had some opportunities, and thank goodness I passed them up. The first one was good, but then like that turned into a month of dating somebody, and oh my God, she was really mean. And she was older, and so you think more mature. No, like it was a shock to the system of what dating was like. I think so. It was not the best experience, I think. And it lasted a month, and I was so heartbroken. And it was funny because I was like, Grace, you've literally endured way worse than this. But dating, I could be wrong, but dating, no matter what age you are, you're like immediately back to high school. Like that the ego, the crush, they're not calling you back. It's like immediately back to high school. So that was bad. And then I don't know if you're going to include this, but like, then I got involved with a married woman. And that was bad.
How was it bad?
It turns out they weren't as open as I thought they were. And plus, like, we were friends, so, it changes. It was a very small community here, so.
What do you mean open? She wasn't as open.
Well, they had an open, but apparently there's stipulation, which I didn't know. I was completely honest. I'm not going to be dishonest. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't good. I would not recommend dating a widow necessarily. I don't know what it's like to date a widow, but I can imagine it can be quite challenging in some ways. So that said, I think that if I choose somebody to date, that's going to have to be discussed from the get-go. And they might have to be open to like talking with other people who date widows. Because I think there are a lot of dynamics and challenges and questions and confusion that comes along with dating a widow, some widows. But I can't answer those questions because I've never dated a widow. But I talk with a lot of widows, and I talk about my experience, and they said, oh yeah, I'm going through that too. So I know that like some of the stuff that I talk about or go through is common and normal. I think even now, if I were to date, I would still have some guilt around, I still have a partner. Like I never broke up with my partner. I think that's the thing. We still have a partnership. So there's that guilt in like, I remember early on it felt like, what's that called? Polygamy. I felt like I was a polygamist or a polyamorous, And I'm not, nothing against it, but I'm not a polyamorous person. But it completely felt like I have this, I'm married over here, but I'm okay to date over here, you know what I mean? At the same time, it was very, very hard to wrap my mind around. And I think it still is.
Yeah. Do you think that'll ever go away?
I don't know. And I think the thing to remember is there's my experience with it, and then there's also the other person's experience with it. And I don't know what that's like. I have no idea.
Do you ever think about dating another widow?
Yeah, I think that for a lot of us, that would be the ideal. It would almost be like a double date. Or like, it's super cheap because two of the people are not eating. So yeah, I think that'd be neat. I don't know.
What feels like home and what keeps you grounded?
What feels like home is feeling unconditionally loved and feeling seen and heard, even if they don't know or understand where I'm coming from. But they're trying to. They're taking the time to do it. So I think that's what feels like home. And I will say, gosh, I was saying this in my grief group last night, with my mom's health and stuff. So I've been spending a lot of time with her. And I was thinking to myself how Lynn felt like home to me. She completely felt like home to me. And so when she passed, I haven't had that sense of home since she's passed. I haven't had that feeling of home and stability and safety and groundedness since she's passed. And I feel, very confident and independent and cared for and loved. I feel all those things, but I don't have that core feeling of home that I had for so long with her. And then I would say the second person who makes me feel like that is my mom. And so it's interesting because, as with life, usually your mom passes before you pass. So I'm just like, at some point, my mom's probably going to pass before me. Do I need that feeling of home from another human being? Or can I somehow create that or get that on my own? I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer for you. Because, separate from any human beings, I feel like I'm doing everything that I want to do right now. I have everything that I need right now. So I'm pretty happy and content. And yet I still would say I don't have a feeling of home, except for when I'm with my mom. But that's still not, it's different from when it's your partner.
What keeps you grounded?
My church is Annandale State Park. So like being in Annandale, running, hiking, being there with friends, being there solo, that's what makes me feel grounded and safe and at home. And it's funny because I can tell when I haven't been in Annandale for like a few days or a week or so. I start to get a little jittery or I feel a little untethered. So it's like even just a couple steps in Annandale makes me feel better again. It's become my place to take new friends. It's become my place to like take first dates. It's become my place where I spend every birthday with a bunch of friends there. It's the place where I go to grieve and cry. It's the place where I go to celebrate. It's the place where I go to feel more spiritual and more connected to spirit. It's become all those things, just naturally and organically. And I will say too, I used to do a lot of half marathons a year. And when Lynn passed, I could barely even walk like half a mile. And I remember it took me 2 months just to be able to walk around Spring Lake, which is only 2 miles. It took me 2 months just to be able to walk around that in one shot. I would just stop and cry and then go back home, and return back. And then Lynn passed in December, and the Annandale Half Marathon was, I think, in March, late March, early April. And I've always done it. So I think January, February, I started training for it. And so it forced me back into Annandale, it forced me back into running, and it forced me back onto those trails for like more than a couple hours at a time. And it was very healing for me. It was very, in some ways I'm like, oh yeah, Annandale saved my life. Because it forced me back on those trails where I was forced to kind of like connect to the ground, connect to the air, connect to the trees and the animals around me. And it forced me to kind of like meditate for like more than an hour or two at a time, because you're out there for a long time and you just have like you're alone with your thoughts. So that forced time and space of just like it's just me and my thoughts and Annandale and all this space to like think whatever I want to think. It totally like was part of my healing process for sure.
If you could give a piece of advice to your past, present, and future self, what would that be?
My past self, I would say, try to be patient with those who don't get it. And my present self, I think I would say, try to work on your weaknesses. And my future self, I think the advice I think I would give is remember what your strengths are and what's helped you in the past. Because I think when I've come across challenges, I forget to like, remember what my strengths are and just rely on those. So, yep.
Thank you.
Oh my God. And boom! That's a wrap.